Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to a video about another one of my holy grails that has finally got a Blu-ray release, and it's the 1995 Russian serial killer film Citizen X. I should say Russian, as it's about Andrei Chikatilo, the first Russian serial killer who killed about 52 people, including 34 under the age of 17, from about 1978 to 1990. This was originally an HBO film, so I never thought it would actually get a Blu-ray release, but this is a Spanish Blu-ray, so hopefully one day it might actually get a kind of, not necessarily a boutique release, but certainly it deserves to be seen. As you can tell by the cover, it stars Donald Sutherland and Stephen Ray, Imelda Staunton, Joss Ackland is in it as well, and Jeffrey DeMunn, Frank Darabont, regular, he actually plays Chikatilo. So this is the only serial killer film that makes me cry, because it's just quite beautiful, apart from all the killing, obviously. But it doesn't glamorise the killer in any way. Jeffrey DeMunn gives a wonderful performance of an almost non-entity, a non-living human being who just rides the trains looking for victims to kill. We see a little bit of his home life, but this is all about Stephen Ray and his fight through bureaucracy and obviously the Communist Party not believing that serial killers exist, because that's a Western decadence. This is really the best kind of Donald Sutherland and Stephen Ray performances people don't know about or haven't seen. I mean, Joss Ackland does chew scenery quite well, but Sutherland and Ray are actually quite moving at times, and it's one of the few kind of serial killer films that you really get a proper sense of the toll the investigation takes, because this was over about 7 years, and Stephen Ray was essentially almost doing it by himself. There's a wonderful scene where he eventually gets permission to talk to the FBI, and Donald Sutherland ends up telling him that, you know, the FBI guy who's in charge of these cases rotates his detectives out every 18 months just so they don't get psychological damage, and of course Stephen Ray's been doing it for 7 years. So that's a beautiful scene that would bring a tear to a glass eye. So again, Chikatilo was a real guy. I remember seeing the news footage of him in court in Russia when he was being sentenced to death, and he was in this cage wearing what looked like checked pyjamas, which we see in the film. So there's been a few kind of unofficial versions. This was based on a book called The Killer Department. That's as Donald Sutherland kind of names this department that Stephen Ray will be heading, because they don't actually have one. So it's based on a book. So this is from 1995, as I said, but you've got Evelenko with Malcolm McDowell chewing scenery, which is loosely based on Chikatilo from 2003. You've also got Child 44 from 2015 with Tom Hardy and Gary Oldman, which is quite bad, which again is kind of loosely inspired by There's also a Russian film on Prime at the moment called The Execution from 2021, which again isn't really an adaptation of Chikatilo, but has some elements. Even though in that film somebody's caught but they don't think he's guilty. So there has been a few kind of loose adaptations, and obviously this isn't like exactly how it happened, but I think this is the most faithful to kind of what happened. So it starts off, Stephen Ray has a new job as the medical examiner, and a body is found in a field, and even though it's almost end of shift, he asks the detectives or the cops that found the body whether you searched the woods, which they didn't, so he sends them back to search the woods, which they're not that happy about because it's end of shift. And then it cuts to Stephen Ray at 9 o'clock at the end of his shift, about to leave, and the cops come back with 6 more bodies, and of course he's not very happy because he wants to go home, and of course the detective or the cop is like, well, looks like you're gonna have a busy night then. So his relationship with his kind of lead detective, if you like, starts off being somewhat frosty, but then the guy, over the years, there's a nice relationship between the two. There's a wonderful relationship between Stephen Ray's character and Donald Sutherland. I mean, there is kind of dry humour between the two, but again, it's more kind of lovely black humour. Obviously the gravity of the situation doesn't lend itself to like knockabout slapstick comedy or anything. But Sutherland is absolutely terrific in this. Now obviously you have to use your imagination. Obviously they're speaking English and they're supposed to be Russian. Obviously Sutherland was Canadian and Ray's Irish, but that doesn't bother you that much. It's not as if they're putting on heavy Russian accents. Obviously Joss Ackland goes a bit further, and he is the one who wants, you know, all the homosexuals rounded up and investigated, because it's obviously a homosexual that does it that's guilty, even although there's wonderful information about certain homosexuals later in the film. And it also works as a nice little, a gentle historical piece as we get to the end of the freezing of the Cold War, and we get to 1990, where the Communist Party doesn't have as much power. It goes from Stephen Ray kind of having to deal with a committee of these guys, with Joss Ackland pretty much being the bully of the committee, to eventually just him and Donald Sutherland, and obviously with their team. But you know, the real kind of gem of the film, apart from Ray and Sutherland, is Max von Sydow turns up, because eventually they get to the stage where they want maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist's view of the case, or view of this guy who's been butchering children essentially. And Max von Sydow plays Bukowski, I believe, who writes this psych profile, and he's key in actually interrogating, or he pretty much just reads out his profile to Jeffrey DeMunn to try and get a confession, because again they're running short of time. Granted, it's played for drama purposes. It's like the last day they can contain him, they can detain him, so they need to get a confession. Whether that's true or not, I would say it's probably not. But he was arrested in 1984. But of course, because Chikatilo was actually a member of the Communist Party at that time, Joss Ackland's character, again, whether it's true or not, but he kind of steamrolls to get him released because he's a member of the Communist Party, even though he was found in a bag with a knife. Well, he wasn't found in a bag with a knife, he was found with a bag with a knife in it. So they did have him, but the bureaucracy let him go for another 6 years to kill even more children and young adults. So it is a wonderful film with great performances. I think there's a couple of bits that are a little cheesy, perhaps. It was shot in Budapest, in Hungary, as opposed to Russia. And an interesting little fact is Greg Nicotero, a famous makeup special effects guy from The Walking Dead and lots of other things, he actually did some makeup effects in the film, probably for all the corpses that are found in little fields. There's one wonderful uncovering of a corpse when a young boy is having a whittle and whittles on the face of a corpse. That's quite a moving passage. But again, it is one of those rare serial killer films where, you know, it doesn't not glorify, but it doesn't kind of, you know, it doesn't make Hannibal Lecter out to be suave and sexy and super intelligent. Jeffrey DeMunn is pretty much an empty shell of a human being, and you also do feel the weight of the loss of all these people. I mean, Stephen Ray just goes through the emotional ringer and obviously takes a lot of personal responsibility because he can't catch this guy. Granted, through half the film his hands are tied by bureaucracy. I mean, Imelda Staunton doesn't have much to do. Stephen Ray's wife, she's just like the voice of reason, as unfortunately quite a lot of women in these films are pretty much just the wife, giving sagely advice to the detective, or in this case kind of the medical examiner slash detective. It's 102 minutes. I should say the print on the Blu-ray is much better than the DVD that used to be an old Snap case, the Region 1 DVD. The Region 1 DVD had a kind of reddy, pinky look to it, whereas the colour on this is much better. It's a really sharp Blu-ray. As far as special features, there is none, but it is an all-region disc. And again, it's just one of those wonderful films that has been sitting in DVD limbo for so long, and I never really thought it would ever get a Blu-ray, but it does have this wonderful little Spanish Blu-ray. And again, the print is much better than the DVD. I mean, the DVD was relatively sharp, but again, it just had that kind of reddy, pinky tinge to it. Whereas the colour on the Blu-ray is much more naturalistic. Yeah, again, there's some wonderful human moments in it. You know, when they first do stakeouts at the train stations, as one of the soldiers who comes with his huge army jacket on, and obviously Stephen Ray chastises him, and the man that's with him says that's his only winter coat that he's got, so Stephen Ray ends up giving him his coat to go kind of undercover, and he says, I'll get it back once the investigation's finished. And then later on, without much announcement, we kind of see that that guy's been incorporated into Stephen Ray's team. So there's little kind of human touches like that that gives you an idea about Ray's character's character, and the fact that he is a deeply humanistic guy, and he has taken all of this personally. And again, the wonderful scene where he finds out that the head of the FBI at Quantico is like, yeah, I rotate my guys off like every 18 months to save them getting burnt out, and Stephen Ray's been doing it for like 7 or 8 years. Yeah, fun for all the family. It has, the brutality is more kind of stylized, and then we just see lots of corpses. So it's not as kind of gory and sensationalist as it could have been. Again, I think 1995 HBO, I'm not really sure how much they could actually show. There's no swearing or anything like that. So again, it's not as exploitative or gory or bloody as it could have been. It's an all-round classy affair, and then of course when Max von Sydow appears, you know, the class rating just goes through the roof. So I would highly recommend Citizen X. The Spanish Blu-ray wasn't that expensive. Yeah, for a film that just could have been lost forever on HBO DVD, it's wonderful to see it on Blu-ray. So thanks so much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen Citizen X and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again as more Grail films get a Blu-ray release. If you write it down on a sheet of paper, it'll all come true. So this is Solid Ronan from Solid Ronan Films, saying farewell